The backward substitution is what I was talking about. When I was uploading the first video, I noticed that I actually did the work wrong. Well, I wrote down the x equation wrong, so x isn't 15. I'm sure most of you already noticed that. The mistake that I made was I had a positive 6 instead of a negative 6. So when we have x minus 9, we add 9 to negative 6, what we actually get is 3. So x is 3. I apologize for that mistake. Okay, so let's go back to talking about this row echelon form. Now your calculator does have an REF button, so your calculator can get you to row echelon form, which is a great way to check your answer. Yes, our calculators for this are mostly just for checking our answer, which is great because you do a lot of work. You want to make sure your answer is right. So once we have the row echelon form, we can then go back and do that backward substitution that I just did and only took us a couple of seconds. And the order triple that was our answer was 3, 7, negative 1/2. Okay. So, but there is something that's even better. We can keep going using them to solve the entire system at once. So what I want you to notice in this next equation, we do have the row echelon form, but instead of there being numbers above like we had over here, now we have zeros above and zeros below. So this is called row reduced or reduced row echelon form because the diagonal contains ones and all of the others are zeros. So the diagonal is 1 and all the others are 0. So actually your calculator also has a row reduced echelon form. So that will give you the final answer in your calculator very simply. And I promise I'm going to show you how to do this. Okay, so let's go ahead and look how to do this. Now, I'm sure you're noticing that I gave myself much more room than I gave you. It's okay. Just write small in the space that I've given you or write this down on a separate sheet of paper because it's important that you have the calculator instructions along with the matrices step by step. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you get your 84s out or whatever calculator you have and find the matrix button. So we hit second x inverse, and that's where the matrix button is. So let me show you where that is. So right here I have my calculator, and the matrix button is right here. Okay? So if we want to get to the matrices, we have to hit second x inverse. Then we're going to go out over to edit, and it doesn't matter which one you choose. I'm just going to choose matrix A. And the first thing you notice is that it's got it written as something times something. Well, that's the order of the matrix. Remember, order goes row by column. So looking at the matrix that we have, or the system of equations that we have in our question, it's a system of 2 equations. So if I'm going to write the augmented matrix, I have 2, 1, line 1, and I have 3, 2, negative 2. So what you can see is we have 2 rows and 3 columns. So the order is 2 by 3 because 2 rows and you hit enter in between. So 2, enter, 3, enter. And now what you see is that it's given you 6 spaces that we need to plug all of our numbers in. So let's go ahead and plug that number in. We have 2, enter, 1, enter, 1, enter, and then 3, 2, negative 2. Negative 2, enter. So now our matrix is the exact matrix that we have written down. So what we want to do is instead of having to do all of that work by hand like we did in example 1, while it wasn't difficult, our calculator can actually do that for us. So you need to quit out of here because if you try to do the math for the matrices inside, it won't work. So I quit out. I hit matrix again, so we go back in, and now we see math. And what I want you to notice is there's all these random things that we're not really going to get into. But what you're going to see as you go down further is you're going to see things that are important. We have the row echelon form. We have row reduced echelon form. And then we have some matrix operations here. This says row plus, so this is when you're adding two rows together. This says multiply a number by the row, and F is multiply a number by a row and then add it to another row. Now these have to be put in a very specific way, and so I'm going to give you that information. So let's go ahead and look at that matrix. The first thing that sticks out to me right away is in the upper left-hand corner, that entry or that number is not 1. And remember, we always wanted a 1. So I notice that I can't swap rows because neither one of those have the first coefficient being 1. So I'm going to, instead of have that 2 there, I'm going to multiply the 2 by some number to get rid of, or to make it 1. So we are going to be multiplying a row. So we're going to do that. So let me go up, maybe. Okay, so we hit enter, and that is not the one I wanted, so let's try that again. Second matrix, math, and we want to do the times by the row. Because I want to take row 1, and I want to multiply it by 1/2, because we can only multiply, you can't divide. So I'm going to multiply by 0.5, and now we have to use the comma button, which is right above your 7. I want to perform this math on matrix A. So I have to go back into the matrix menu. See how A is already highlighted, so just hit enter. Another comma. And I want to do this to row 1. So this is me saying multiply by the matrix A by 0.5, but we're only multiplying row 1. No. We're only multiplying row 1. So, and then end parenthesis. So we hit enter. And look, our matrix pops up, and now you know you've done it correctly because that 2 has become a 1. So let's write that down really quick in our notes. How did we do that? So what we did, and you don't have to show this work every time, but this is just for us with this example. And I don't understand why my pen is so wide. Let's go back to thin. Okay. So we took row 1 times 0.5. Okay. And when I do that, I ended up with 1, 0.5, 0.5, and 3, 2, negative 2. Now, how did we plug that into our calculators again? We did the times row, and we wrote 0.5, comma, matrix A, comma, 1. That still looks horrible. Why is my pen acting so silly? Okay, we'll try medium again. So, now what I want to do is I need to get a 0 where this 3 is. Okay, so I want to take row 1, and I want to multiply it by negative 3. So we're doing negative 3 row 1 plus row 2. And what that tells us to do is we are actually going to be doing the multiply by row and add. So our calculator instructions are multiply row, and there's a plus sign afterwards. So we want to multiply the row by negative 3, so negative 3 goes first. Now, if I put in matrix A, because I do want this to happen to matrix A, I will go back to the original matrix A and do this, but we don't want to do it to the original matrix A. We want to do it to our answer. So we're actually going to use that answer button. Comma, I want to multiply row 1, so I'm going to put a 1, and I want to replace row 2. So I'm going to put a 2. So there's commas after all of those. So now we're going to go back to our calculator, and let's do that here. So we have to go second matrix. Second matrix. We want to go over to the math, and I want to find the times row plus button. Enter. Okay? I'm multiplying row 1 by negative 3, comma. I want to do this to the answer, so you hit second negative signs to get that answer, comma. I am going to multiply negative 3 by row 1, comma, and I want to replace row 2. So then we hit enter. Perfect, we got the 0 that we want. So we know we've done something correct. So the next step is to get a 1 right here. So a 1 right there. And to get a 1 there, if I have, think about it as you have 0.5, which is really 1/2. What would we multiply by to get 1/2? Or to get 1? We would multiply it by 2. So since I'm lazy, I just arrowed up because I knew I wanted to multiply a row by something, and I stole that. Now you can always go back and do the matrix menu again because we have to change all of this. So I want to multiply row 2 by 2. And we don't want this to be for matrix A, we want it to be for the answer again because we're still transforming the answer. And remember, we're doing this to row 2. Hit enter. Perfect. Look, now we have 1.5.5, 0, 1, -7. So let's write that down in our notes really quick. Okay, so I didn't write down my original answer, but I can do that really quick. So we got 1.5.5. That still didn't change. And this one became 0.5, -3.5. And then we just multiplied row 2 by 2. Row 2 times 2. And that gave us 1.5.5 and 0, 1, -7. Now remember, we plugged that into our calculators doing times row, and I want to multiply the row by 2. I wanted to do this to the answer from before, and I wanted to replace row 2. Now, the last thing to do, because we want this to be in row reduced echelon form, so I need to get rid of this 0.5. So I'm going to multiply row 2 by 0.5 and add it to row 1, or I'm sorry, -0.5. So -0.5 times row 2 plus row 1. Let's write down what that would look like. So we're going to be doing multiply by a row and then a plus sign at the end because we're adding it to another row. And I am going to multiply by -0.5. I'm going to multiply that by the answer. I'm going to multiply row 2 and I'm going to replace row 1. I hope you're starting to understand how this notation for the calculator goes. So let's go ahead and do that. Now I'm too lazy to go all the way back to the matrix menu, so I just like to grab it from there. So I'm doing -0.5. Oh, I forgot my negative sign. So second insert negative. -0.5. I want to do the answer. I wanted to multiply that by row 2 and replace row 1. Beautiful. Now we have row reduced echelon form. So let's go ahead and write that down on our paper. We have 104, 0, 1, -7. So this gives us 104, 0, 1, -7. So our answers are x equals 4 and y equals -7. Or you can write it as 4, -7. Now, let's check our answer because we just did basically all this work by hand, only letting our calculator do it. So, the easiest, quickest way to check our answer, if we go back into matrix, maybe, and we go to math, and you find RREF, row reduced echelon form. And we want to do that for matrix A, so we have to go back into the matrix again. It's kind of annoying calculator button-wise, but just think of all the work you're saving. And see, we get the exact same answer. So even doing those steps by hand or using our calculator to do those steps, we are getting the exact same answer at the end. So this is how you can check any answers. Okay, one more video and then we're done.